I've got them here. The last 4 years of tax increases in the city of Sudbury are the lowest that have been put on the books in the last 14 years. Still too high, but lowest.
Another rebuttal?
Yes, and thank you, Dave. I've looked at the rates myself, absolutely, and yes, we're in excess of 5% over inflation, not acceptable, and we need to do more.
There was a couple of words that kind of piqued my ears. One was adjusting contracts with clauses. Good idea, except onerous clauses mean higher bids. We have to be very careful on what we do with this. Perhaps we should listen to them that are doing the service for us and see where we can work with them to make it better. The other thing I heard was people. People can be a problem, sure, if you don't want to work with them. Our staff are not the issue. The contractors are not the issue. We must do better to listen and work with people.
Anyone else want that? Going once? Going twice? Sold.
Third question to Mr. Jacobo. What is the most important issue you see in your ward? What is the most important issue you see in your ward?
Thank you, Jerry, and such an important question. I've visited over 1,500 houses so far in this campaign and reached out to over 3,000 voters. And overwhelmingly, the response that I've received is the biggest issue in not only Ward 7, but in the whole city is our infrastructure. We're talking roads that are old and crumbling, roads that we're not getting the full value out of when we're repairing them or building new roads. We're also talking about water and wastewater lines. Our infrastructure there is very old, and we do need to coordinate with road construction projects to make sure that we're getting the best bang for our buck and addressing all of those infrastructure concerns. Infrastructure moves further, as I said earlier, to complementary infrastructure. We have parks and playgrounds in Ward 7 with equipment that is over 30 years old. There are some safety concerns, and those I understand are being addressed, and I'm very thankful for that. But still, the equipment is over 30 years old, and it does not cater to all levels of children. You'd find that if you had an 8-year-old, they would be okay to go to any park or playground and play. But if you had younger kids, you have to follow them up the ladders to the slides. You have to make sure they're not walking out the openings and falling 6 feet down. Those are dangers. And we also need to, in order to implement a full strategy for our infrastructure deficit, we need to look at how we're financing those expenditures. Any successful business will see that any major expenditure is not paid for all in one shot. And so if we're going to build a road that's going to last us 25 years, we need to be a lot more open-minded to say maybe we should be financing that over a longer term of 15 or 20 years rather than hitting the taxpayer all in one shot.
After speaking with several members of the ward during the campaign, the issue that keeps coming up is transportation, which includes snow removal, transit schedule, as well as quality of roads. Snow removal last year was such an issue that many people, both differently abled and not, had a hard time getting around in the ward. We have to do a better job of making both roadways as well as sidewalks as easy for travel as possible, because they are how money travels within the city. We also have to address our crumbling roads by instituting a higher paving standard and holding contractors who win bids accountable for the quality of work they do. The city also has to take a long, hard look at the transit schedule as well as handy transit service to make them both more user-friendly and effective. I'll bring up the idea of making some of the most underused routes free for a period of time in order to increase the use of transit service. City transit is and will continue to be the most important service we provide as more people, due to environmental, financial, or health reasons, will rely on transit services, especially with our aging population.
Things that are important to Ward 7, I think, are important throughout the city, but they really stick out in Ward 7. Ward 7 lacks the attention to infrastructure, parks, and open spaces that have been addressed in many other parts of the city over the past 10 years. Over the past 4 years, we've addressed several needs, but there's still many parks that are substandard and need attention. We even discovered 2 parks over the last year that nobody knew and were not on the chart. Many of the main roads in Ward 7 have been upgraded over the past few years. Garson-Coniston Road, Falconbridge Road, the entry into Falconbridge, Radar Road, and more have been completed over the past 4 years and done since amalgamation. But a lot more attention must be made to addressing the state of side roads and many of the local streets. Sidewalks are inconsistent and most often not plowed in the wintertime. Development of higher levels of community pride are important to our ward. Parks in Ward 7 have not been given the cosmetic upgrades that many of the other parks in the city have seen over the last 10 years. Ward 7, I believe, is one of the few wards in the city that does not have a splash pad for their youth. It's important to note that only when you, as citizens, get together and bring to the attention of the councillor and the city itself of needs from within your ward, do things start to happen. And I would encourage anybody, we're all part of the city of Greater Sudbury, but we're also important members of our own communities. And we want or need things to happen, we have to get involved. Community Action Networks, or CANs, are available in both Garson and Capriel. And I would urge you to try and get involved in your CANs and become more involved in your community. Thank you.
Again, I'm going to make this very short. Since the amalgamation of the city, seems our ward, Ward 7 here, is treated as second-class citizens. Our tax dollars are spent more for the city proper than here. Our streets and sidewalks are falling apart, and yet we are the last ones to be seen. We are not a cash cow for this city. We should get something in return. We have beautiful parks, as I said earlier, and playgrounds around here, and for some reason, little or no benches, and no trash bins. Do we not have a Parks and Rec department? Or is that just set up for the city proper? We are not utilizing our facilities, say the arenas, to their fullest. And all summer, they just sit there empty, costing us all kinds of money. We have to review our transit system. The city is expanding, and people have a long way to go to catch a bus. Maybe we should look at gridding the city instead of everything going straight to downtown. It would make things a lot easier for everybody concerned. I'd like to say thank you for now.
Rebuttal, gentlemen. Go ahead.
I'm so very glad that Dave brought up the issue of splash pads. It's an issue that's near and dear to my heart. In 2010, splash pads were approved for 7 different locations, including Garson and Capriel, and those never came to fruition. If it's a matter of dollars, we need to be fighting more for them. But one of the things that Dave said is you need the interest from the community in order to get a project done. What I've found in talking to many different people in Garson, Falconbridge, Skeed, and Capriel is that there is a lot of interest when you knock on people's doors and you're proactive in engaging the public in what they want to see in their community. The people in Garson and the people in Capriel would love to see a splash pad in their communities for their children and for their grandchildren, and it's something we need to make happen.
Thank you.
I actually want to congratulate 2 of these gentlemen. Full value roads was a point brought up. I love it. So let's get some bike lanes with those roads as we're digging down to replace sewers and do proper curbing. Parks and Rec, great. I have a great suggestion for you both. Let's audit city services. Let's look at the duplication, and let's not increase anymore above 4.9%. We will find the money to get your jobs done to help our children. The other thing I congratulate him for is involvement, but I assure you I see it in Caperhill. I seen it in Ski when I was talking to people who were working and picking up trash as they were walking. I see it all over Ward 7. So I agree. Involvement means all of us.
Thank you.
Last question is for Mr. Roche, and it's not the question you have. Oh, yes, sorry. No, number 5 is not the question you have. Given the proposed budget of a 4.9% increase in taxes for the coming year, what action would you suggest be taken? So given the proposed budget of a 4.9% increase in taxes for the coming year, what actions would you suggest be taken?
I just was here. The forecasted tax increase is one that worries many, especially those on a fixed income. My proposed city services audit will certainly point to areas where we can be more efficient. As well, the city must consider selling off many, if not all of its unused or vacant property holdings. The city has to reconsider what services are essential as well as what services are nice to have but are non-essential, and then make decisions on where to start divesting ourselves from those non-essential services. The city has to work hard to accomplish things without always having to spend a lot of money. Just like I have said during my campaign, some good things can be accomplished without spending money. Using my idea of upgrading the website that captures employees' suggestions, we will be able to identify areas where we can make immediate changes to allow us to deliver service in a much more cost-effective manner. I'd also champion the idea that we can create an award system for city managers or employees who come up with ideas and ways to reduce their departmental budgets. By creating an award system, possibly monetary, that champions cost effectiveness in departments, we will create an environment that shows we value this sort of input and encourage future money-saving initiatives. The cost of such a plan will be minimal in comparison to the savings we could derive from it.
Just a quick preamble, the 4.9%, there is also a figure in there for 2016, 2017. Budgets you have to take a look at them in advance, and when you do it in advance, you've got to make sure that you're not underselling, because it's easier to lower a number than it is to raise one. Once the budget process starts, and it won't start probably until January or February now because of the election, the first thing that is normally done, you sit down as a council and try to decide what type of a budget increase you want. If it's 2.9%, you give that to staff, they go back and they come back with suggestions and options on how to get there. If we're going to do anything sustainable or long-term with our budget, I think we have to do what we're trying to do at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and go after the federal government for 1% of the HST. They were talking about dropping 1% of the HST, and this started a couple of years ago and we've been working on it ever since. If we took 1% of the HST that was collected in Sudbury, that would amount to $43 million that could go directly into infrastructure improvements in the city. Back in the 1990s, the cities and municipalities were getting 28% of the tax dollar for the entire country. We are now getting between 7 and 8%. We have to make the federal and provincial governments more accountable and give us back some of the monies that they've been taking away. And I think the last thing, probably the most important thing on this issue, is that most municipalities are setting up an open data system where you know what's going to happen at the city. And one of the things they're offering in many municipalities is something called citizens' budgets, where they actually put budget items on the screen. And if you're looking at the Elgin Greenway, which is one thing, and you're looking at the new St. Joseph's fixing up in Bell Park, you would have a choice. You'd have all the plans, and you choose which way we're going to move on some of these things. And I think it's important for the public to get involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, I'm going to make it very short. We already have 600 plus or minus homeless around here. And with a 4.9 increase, we will force many more. We have a lot of seniors hanging on tooth and claw. This will cause them to lose what they worked so hard for all their lives. I would suggest that we review this budget and see where we could cut the fat on wasteful spending, causing this increase going back to previous questions. The cost, where am I? The cost of an out-of-country ombudsman, the so-called slush funds, and the amount of city vehicles could be reduced in this budget by many thousands of dollars, which impact the budget of a 4.9% increase. This also impacts the incentive to attract new business and development to our city.
Thank you.
As we all heard, the budgeting process starts at the direction of council. And as council, what we need to do is we need to tell staff 4.9% is not an acceptable starting point. Focus it more on the rate of inflation and have that be a starting point. So say 2%. And at the end of the day, maybe we can get it down to 1% or lower. We need to ensure we're getting the full value for a dollar out of our contracts. In 2013, our contracted services amounted to over $90 million. That's roads that we're having to redo after 5 years. Those are snow plowing projects or snow plowing that has to be redone. If we can eliminate those additional costs, we can address the 4.9% increase. We also, as I said earlier, need to match our financing of capital expenditures to the lifespan of the projects that we're taking on. As I mentioned earlier, a 25-year road being paid over 20 years. That makes sense to me. It makes sense to anybody here that's a homeowner who got a mortgage to buy their house. And we also need to encourage our departments at City Hall to change the way they look at managing their budgets. Right now, they have the attitude of, if you don't use it, you lose it for the next year. So let's reward city departments who generate surpluses by allowing them to have the same budget